Well, Senator, the so-called GIVE Act, what is the real intent of this bill?
You know, it's hard for me to accept we're even talking about it. All last year we used this word crisis to pass, one bailout, one stimulus, one spending bill after another because we were having a crisis. But this bill we're talking about this week of creating a government entity that hires 250,000 people, supposedly as volunteers, is unimaginable at a time when we have such a difficult economy, we're borrowing and spending so much. The proponents of the bill just say it's going to encourage volunteerism. It's the last thing we need the government to do. Volunteerism in our civil society is what works in America. It's everything the government's not. It's small, it's accountable, and it's personal. The government is the opposite from that. And those who think the government can come in and run our charities and volunteerism better than it's being run now have not watched what we've been doing the last couple of decades.
Why did you feel it was necessary to introduce an amendment to this bill to correct the wrong direction it is going?
Well, we know that this is going to be used for political purposes, that these so-called volunteers are going to be involved with political activity and things that a lot of us would figure would not support normally, and that would not be supported with normal charitable giving. So the government is going to support things. And my amendment, which was eventually actually introduced by Senator David Vitter, would just prohibited these funds from going to ACORN, groups that have been clearly political and ideological, that have been organizing communities for political purposes, and groups that are associated with them. Unfortunately, our Democrat colleagues were able to kill that bill, which shows their true intent.
Some people say that the amendment will hinder people from volunteering. What do you say to those people had this amendment passed?
Well, they're obviously suggesting that a lot of this money is going to those groups, which they say it's not. And on one hand, they say the money is not going to ACORN anyway, and the other hand, they're saying it's going to limit volunteerism. You can't trust what they say. Clearly, they voted down this amendment, which means they want the money to go to organizations for political purposes rather than true charitable needs out in our communities.
Since the bill passed without your amendment, some folks are saying that liberal politicians will still use it to funnel money to left-wing organizations. How do you respond to that, and what can be done about it now?
Well, I'm confident that a lot of this money will be funneled to left-wing liberal organizations. I also know that the money will not go to a number of established charities that are faith-based, that have some religious mission, and that includes a lot of our charitable and volunteer organizations. A lot of giving and volunteer activity in this country is motivated by religious beliefs. And now that we get the government involved with that, they completely purge that motivation. So instead of the pure motives that come from a religious perspective, now we're funneling money towards political organizations that have a completely different intent than the voluntary civil society.
Now that the amendment got tabled, what can regular people do to help and fix this problem?
I'm afraid all we can do now is just make it clear to senators and congressmen that we've had enough. I think we not only need to vote against the folks who voted for it, whether they're Republican or Democrat. I think I'm encouraged by some of the peaceful demonstrations we're seeing from Boston Tea Parties and other things. People are going to have to show their alarm and their outrage in ways that we haven't done in America in years, because Washington is ignoring their constituents. I mean, we're ignoring the people who sent us here, and we're saying one thing and doing another. If you listen to what Obama says, it still sounds great, but you look at what he puts in writing with his budget or with this Service Act, he's going a completely different way towards more and more government intervention into our culture as well as our economy.